The moment I saw the baby, I knew. My wife had been lying to me for 9 months, and there she was, still trying to force me to sign the birth certificate. Just 15 minutes earlier, I had rushed out of the office, my heart pounding with excitement. Today was the day I would meet my first child. But now, I stood frozen outside the hospital room. My mother-in-law blocked the doorway, her eyes tight, her voice low but firm. "Michael, wait." I had no idea that stepping through that door would shatter my marriage and force me to make a choice, protect myself or be tied for life to another man's child. This isn't just a story about betrayal. It's a lesson in how clear-headed a man must be when facing the greatest shock of his life. If it were you, what would you do? Forgive, or walk away? Stay with me. I'll tell you everything. My name is Michael Carter. I'm 38, living in Brooklyn, New York, working at Sterling and Finch Investment Group in Manhattan. For most of my life, I believed in two things: hard work and family. Rachel and I had been married for 5 years. We had our ups and downs, sure, but I thought we were solid. We'd been trying for a baby for over a year. When she finally told me she was pregnant, it felt like every late night, every sacrifice, was worth it. I imagined teaching my child to ride a bike in Prospect Park, watching fireworks from the Brooklyn Heights promenade, passing down my father's old watch on their graduation day. Back then, I didn't know those dreams would be stolen from me before I ever held my child. Those last days before it all happened felt perfect. I remember one Saturday morning, Rachel and I were in the nursery we'd been putting together for weeks. She laughed at how I was obsessing over the paint lines, a smudge of pale yellow on her cheek. "The baby won't care if the stripes aren't perfect," she teased. On my desk at work sat a small, cream-colored teddy bear with a blue bow tie. My quiet reminder that soon I'd be a father. Every ultrasound appointment, every late-night ice cream run to satisfy her cravings, felt like another brick in the home we were building together. If you'd asked me then, I would have said I was the luckiest man alive. I had no idea how close I was to losing everything. One evening over dinner at our favorite little Italian place in Williamsburg, we started talking baby names. I leaned towards something classic, like James or Elizabeth. Rachel wanted something unique. Luca for a boy, Eel for a girl. We never found out the gender. She said she wanted it to be a surprise, like Christmas morning. I loved that idea. It made me feel like she was just as excited as I was. We laughed that night, clinking glasses over pasta, promising to figure it out when we met our child. I didn't realize I'd never get that moment. That dinner was one of the last times I'd feel truly connected to my wife. Soon, those warm memories would feel like a cruel setup for what was coming. The week before the due date, we had our last checkup at Mount Sinai. Rachel held my hand in the waiting room, her green eyes sparkling as the doctor assured us everything was on track. We drove home talking about how our lives were about to change forever. She asked me to install the car seat that night, just in case. I remember tightening every strap, making sure nothing could possibly harm our baby. It was instinct: protect and provide. She watched from the porch, smiling. At that moment, there was no doubt in my mind that we were a team. I didn't know she'd already broken that bond, that the person I was protecting wasn't even mine to protect. It was a Thursday afternoon, around 2:45 p.m., when my phone lit up with a text from Rachel. "Baby's here, room 412, Mount Sinai Hospital. Can't wait for you to meet our little one." A rush of adrenaline hit me. I barely remember grabbing my jacket or telling my colleague David that I had to go. He grinned, calling after me, "Go meet your kid, Dad." That word, Dad, hit me hard. It made everything real. The quarterly report on my desk didn't matter. Nothing mattered except getting to that hospital as fast as possible. I didn't know those would be the last 15 minutes of my life where I believed I was about to meet my child. I ran to the elevator, loosening my navy silk tie, the one Rachel gave me last anniversary. Memories flashed. That night, we celebrated, talking about baby names over dessert. The elevator doors opened to the parking garage, and I practically sprinted to my car. Sitting in the passenger seat was the teddy bear I'd bought weeks earlier. I picked it up, smiling at the thought of placing it in the crib. My hands shook slightly on the wheel as I pulled into Manhattan traffic, silently thanking whoever kept the roads clear that day. Every red light felt like an eternity. I was seconds away from stepping into the moment I had dreamed about for 9 months. I didn't know I was about to step into a nightmare instead. I parked outside Mount Sinai, grabbed the teddy bear, and felt my phone buzz again. This time it was from Linda, my mother-in-law. "Are you almost here?" "No, congratulations." "No, you're a father." "Just a plain question." I brushed it off. Maybe she was stressed. I texted back, "Just parked," and headed toward the entrance. A hospital door slid open, letting out a blast of cool air. Inside, families held balloons. Nurses hurried past. I knew exactly where to go. I'd walked this path for ultrasounds and checkups. But as I got closer to the maternity ward, something nagged at me. I couldn't explain it. A tension in the air like the moment before a storm hits. In the elevator to the 4th floor, I stood next to an elderly couple holding a pink balloon that read, "It's a girl." They smiled at the teddy bear in my hand. "First time?" the woman asked. I nodded, grinning. "You have that look," the man chuckled. "Nothing like it in the world." I smiled back, thinking he was right. When the doors opened, I let them step out first. My shoes squeaked against the polished floor as I followed the signs to room 412. The hallway smelled faintly of antiseptic and fresh flowers. I could hear a baby crying somewhere down the corridor. My pace quickened. Just a few more steps and my life would never be the same. Linda was standing outside room 412, arms folded, blocking the doorway like a sentry. She wore a dark navy dress, more formal than I'd ever seen her. Her face was tight, unreadable. "Michael," she said, her tone flat. "I think you should wait out here for a moment." I froze, my excitement faltering. "What? Why? Is something wrong with Rachel? With the baby?" She shifted, glancing at the closed door. "It's complicated. Just give me a few minutes with her first." My chest tightened. This wasn't how it was supposed to go. I wasn't about to stand outside while my wife and child were inside that room. I took a step forward. "No," I said, my voice low but firm. "I'm going in." Linda's hand shot out, pressing against my chest. "Michael, please just listen to me." Her voice cracked slightly, but her grip was firm. "You're scaring me," I said, keeping my tone low as a nurse passed by. "What's going on?" She glanced toward the door again, her jaw tightening. "I'm trying to protect you." My heart pounded harder. Protect me from what? Every instinct screamed that something was wrong. I pushed past her, the teddy bear slipping from my hand and landing on the floor. Her sharp breath followed me, but I didn't stop. My palm gripped the door handle. I had no idea that the next few seconds would replay in my mind for the rest of my life. The first thing I noticed was how normal everything looked. Warm afternoon sunlight poured through the windows, making the flowers on the sill glow. Machines beeped steadily in the background. Rachel lay in the hospital bed, her chestnut hair damp and tied back, a bundle of white blankets in her arms. For one perfect moment, it was exactly how I'd imagined it, my wife holding our child. Then I saw the baby's face. My breath caught in my throat. My mind tried to reject what my eyes saw. The baby's skin was a deep, beautiful brown. My skin went cold. I took a step forward, then back, as if I couldn't decide whether to move closer or run. Rachel's eyes widened, her color draining as she clutched the baby closer. "Michael," she whispered. "I can explain." My voice came out. "Explain what?" "How our child," the words caught. I couldn't finish the sentence. Tears welled in her eyes. It was a mistake. One terrible mistake. I shook my head slowly. Getting the wrong coffee is a mistake. Forgetting an anniversary is a mistake. This, I gestured toward the child, isn't a mistake. This is a choice. A series of choices. My throat felt tight. My heartbeat was loud in my ears. Behind me, I heard the door close softly. Linda had stepped inside. "You knew," I said, turning to face Linda. Her eyes dropped to the floor. "I found out when the baby was born," she said quietly. "I just wanted to give Rachel a chance to tell you herself." I laughed, but it was a bitter, hollow sound. Protect everyone. Where was that protection when your daughter was cheating on me? Rachel's voice cracked. "We can work through this, Michael. We can raise this baby together. All you have to do is sign the birth certificate." I stared at her, wondering if I'd ever truly known the woman in front of me. "Sign it? You want me to take responsibility for your affair? For your lies?" My voice hardened. "Not a chance. I'm not signing anything without a DNA test," I said firmly. Rachel's head snapped up. "A DNA test? You'd really do that to your own child?" "My child?" I stepped closer, locking eyes with her. "Look at that baby, Rachel. We both know the truth." Her lip trembled, but she stayed silent. "How long?" I asked. "What? How long have you been cheating on me? Was it a one-time thing, or have you been lying to me our entire marriage?" Her shoulders sagged. "It happened a few times. I never meant for this, for me to find out," I cut in. The air between us was thick, suffocating. I felt my wedding ring digging into my skin like it didn't belong there anymore. "Who is he?" I asked, my voice low. Rachel stared down at the baby, refusing to meet my eyes. Linda shifted uncomfortably beside her. "You know what?" "Don't tell me," I said, backing toward the door. "I don't want to know." My gaze dropped to the teddy bear lying where I dropped it. Its blue bow tie suddenly looked like a cruel joke. "You want someone's name on that certificate? Put the real father's name on it." Rachel's voice rose with desperation. "You can't just walk away. We're married." "You destroyed that the moment you decided to sleep with someone else," I replied. "Marriage vows include faithfulness. You forgot that part." The baby's soft cries filled the tense silence. I turned for the door, each step heavier than the last. "My lawyer will be in touch about the DNA test," I said without looking back. "And Rachel, don't put my name on that certificate. That's fraud, and I'll fight it with everything I have." Her sobs followed me into the hallway, mingling with the baby's cries. My footsteps echoed down the corridor as I walked toward the elevator. The elderly couple from earlier stepped out as I approached. The woman's smile faded when she saw my face. I barely noticed. Inside the elevator, my reflection stared back at me. Not the man who had entered this hospital full of hope, but someone else entirely. Someone whose trust had just been destroyed. When I got home, I slammed the front door hard enough to rattle the picture frames. One of them tilted. Our wedding photo. I reached out to straighten it, then stopped. Instead, I turned it face down on the table. The house felt different. The cream-colored couch where we'd watched movies, the kitchen where we'd cooked together, the nursery upstairs. It all felt poisoned. I felt like it was choking me, so I yanked it off and tossed it onto the counter. It landed next to the pregnancy calendar Rachel had kept, every week carefully marked. I stared at it, wondering how many of those weeks had been mine and how many had been his. My phone buzzed. Rachel again. I ignored it. A few minutes later, another buzz, then another. 17 missed calls by the time I checked. Texts from both her and Linda, "Please come back. Don't make hasty decisions. Think about the baby." The last one from Rachel read, "The baby needs a father." I muttered to myself. Should have thought about that before. Tossing the phone onto the couch, I headed for her home office. The smell of her vanilla perfume still lingered. Pregnancy books and parenting magazines cluttered the desk, but I wasn't looking for reading material. I wanted the truth, and I was ready to find it, no matter how much it hurt. Rachel's laptop sat closed on the desk. I flipped it open, the password screen glowing in the dim light. I typed in our anniversary date, 0922. It unlocked instantly. My hand hovered over the keyboard. Did I really want to know? Was the truth worse than what I imagined? I started clicking through folders, then froze when I saw her email drafts. There in black and white was the name Carlos Ramirez and the words, "Michael can't know." Once he signs the birth certificate, everything will be easier. My stomach turned. It wasn't just an affair. It was a plan. A long, deliberate plan to make me raise another man's child. I sat there staring at the screen, my hands clenched. That's when I heard the front door open. Michael? It was David, my closest friend. He stepped into the office, took one look at my face, and knew something was wrong. "You weren't answering your phone," he said. "What happened?" My voice was flat. "I went to meet my child today, except it's not my child." His eyes widened. "Jesus, you sure?" I nodded toward the laptop. "Read it." He skimmed the email, his jaw tightening. "You need a lawyer. Now." I told him I already had someone in mind. Robert Hughes. David didn't waste time. Then we get every bit of evidence she's left behind. We plugged in a flash drive from David's bag and started copying everything. Email drafts, sent messages, even deleted files Rachel hadn't wiped properly. Every click felt like ripping off another bandage, exposing more of the wound. In one message, she told Carlos to stay away until the paperwork is done. In another, she assured him I'd be a wonderful father to his child. David looked at me. "She's been planning this for months." I nodded, my jaw locked. "And she thought I'd never find out." I scrolled further, the words blurring as my anger rose. This wasn't panic. This was calculated betrayal. And now she'd have to face the consequences. I dialed Robert Hughes, putting the call on speaker so David could hear. His receptionist answered, and within a minute, Robert's deep, measured voice came on. "Michael, what's going on?" I told him. The birth, the DNA doubts, the emails, the pressure to sign. He didn't hesitate. "Don't sign anything. Not the birth certificate, not hospital forms. I'll clear my schedule. Can you come to my office in an hour?" "I'll be there." His tone sharpened. "Bring every piece of evidence you've got. Texts, emails, call logs. We're going to need it all." I hung up, feeling not better, but steadier. At least I had a plan. Just as I shut the laptop, my phone buzzed. The caller ID read Mount Sinai Hospital. I answered, bracing myself. It was a nurse from the maternity ward. "Mr. Carter, we still need your signature for the birth certificate." My throat tightened. "I'm not signing anything until a DNA test is done." There was a pause, then a careful, "All right, sir. I'll note that." As soon as I hung up, a text from Rachel came through. "Please, just sign. We can talk later. The baby needs you." I stared at it, feeling my blood pressure climb. The baby didn't need me. He needed his real father, the man who'd vanished the moment things got complicated. David suggested I record the next conversation. I hit the record button before calling Rachel back. Her voice was raw from crying. "Michael, please, you can't just disappear like this. We need to talk." "Talk about what?" "How you've been cheating on me. Or how you plan to trick me into raising another man's child." Silence, then. "You've been going through my private things." I almost laughed. "Private? Like your private affair? Your private plan for paternity fraud?" She flinched at the word. "It's not fraud. I made a mistake." "No," I said coldly. "A mistake is accidental. This was a choice." Over and over again. Rachel tried to soften her tone. The hospital needs the birth certificate filed today. Please, Michael, we can get counseling. We can work this out. I shook my head even though she couldn't see it. The only thing we're getting is a divorce. My lawyer will be in touch about the DNA test. Her desperation cracked through. The baby needs a father. He has one, I said. His name is Carlos. Put it on the certificate. Her voice turned sharp. He doesn't want to be involved. I let out a bitter laugh. That's between you and him. I want no part of it. An hour later, I was in Robert Hughes's office, watching him scan through the evidence on my flash drive. His office smelled faintly of leather and old books, every wall lined with framed degrees. As he read the emails, his expression darkened. She made our job easier, he said finally. This is clear evidence of intent to deceive. I leaned forward. What's next? First, we file for a DNA test immediately. Given the visible evidence, no judge will refuse it. Once we have the results, we block her from naming you as the father. If she tries anyway, we press fraud charges. I felt a grim satisfaction. At least the law was on my side. Over the next week, I avoided all contact with Rachel. Every call, every text went straight to voicemail or archive. David checked in daily, sometimes bringing food, sometimes just sitting in silence with me. The DNA test was scheduled for the following Monday. I focused on documenting everything. Messages from Rachel alternating between begging and threatening. Think about what you're throwing away. You'll regret this. Don't do this to us. Each one was saved, timestamped, stored in a growing file labeled evidence. Every ping of my phone felt like another reminder of the woman I no longer recognized. The envelope sat on Robert's desk. He handed it to me without a word. My hand shook as I tore it open. There it was in bold. Probability of paternity, 0%. My chest felt both lighter and heavier at the same time. What now? I asked. Robert's mouth tightened. Now we move forward with divorce proceedings. And she's already tried to file the birth certificate with your name. After the test? Exactly. It's desperate, but it strengthens our fraud case. I exhaled slowly. This wasn't just about protecting myself anymore. It was about making sure she couldn't do this to anyone else. That night, Rachel called again. I answered, putting her on speaker for David to hear. A fraud complaint? Really, she hissed. You listed me as the father after a DNA test proved I'm not, I said evenly. What would you call it? Abandoning your family, she shot back. I almost laughed. Family? You destroyed that when you cheated and tried to trap me into raising another man's child. Her voice softened suddenly. What do you want from me? The truth. And for once, to take responsibility for your choices. She went silent, then admitted. Carlos blocked me. He won't help. I ended the call. Then that's your problem, I said to the empty room. By now, the anger had burned into something colder. Focus. I knew what I had to do. Every text from Rachel, every voicemail from Linda, every email. I archived and labeled them. Robert had told me, judges don't just hear stories, they read proof. So, I gave him proof. I organized everything into folders. Hospital, emails to Carlos, threats, pleading. David sat beside me at the kitchen table, sorting screenshots while I printed transcripts. The house was silent except for the hum of the printer and the occasional buzz of my phone. I didn't check it. I already knew it was her. She could keep calling. The next time we spoke, it would be in front of a judge. The days before the court date stretched like weeks. I kept my routine up, 6 o'clock, coffee, gym, work, but everything felt mechanical. My mind was always somewhere else, replaying moments in the hospital, her voice saying it was just a mistake. I stopped answering most calls, even from friends, except David and Robert. Every time I walked past the nursery, I shut the door. The pale yellow walls and the empty crib felt like a crime scene. Evidence of a life I'd been building on a lie. I promised myself that no matter how this ended, I'd never let anyone get close enough to take that from me again. One evening, Robert called with an update. "I've handled cases like this before," he said, "but not often with evidence this strong. You're not just protecting yourself here, Michael. If she'd gotten away with this, it could have meant 18 years of financial responsibility for a child who isn't yours." His words sank in. It wasn't just about my pride or heartbreak. This was about freedom, my future. I thought about the other men out there who'd been trapped, who didn't have proof, who'd had to live with someone else's lie. I wasn't going to be one of them, and I wasn't going to stay quiet. The night before the first hearing, I couldn't sleep. I paced my apartment, rehearsing what I'd say on the stand. David came over with takeout, but I barely touched it. "You ready for tomorrow?" he asked. "As ready as I'll ever be." I kept seeing Rachel's face in the hospital bed, clutching the baby like it was a shield. I wondered if she'd cry in court, if she'd try to look small and fragile. I decided it didn't matter. The truth was the truth, and tomorrow the truth would be in the open. The morning air was crisp, sunlight bouncing off the stone facade of the New York County Courthouse. I adjusted my tie. Not the one Rachel had given me. That was gone. This one was new. Clean slate. David pulled up in his black BMW, stepping out in a suit. "Thought you might want backup," he said. Robert was already waiting at the steps, his leather briefcase in hand. "They're inside," he told me. "Rachel, her lawyer, and her mother." "What about Carlos?" I asked. "Gone. Moved to Texas last month. A coward's exit. Maybe it was better this way." We passed through security, the metal detector beeping as I emptied my pockets into the tray. The marble hallway seemed to stretch forever. My shoes echoed with each step toward courtroom 3. Outside the heavy wooden doors, Robert turned to me. "Let me do most of the talking. When you testify, stick to the facts. No emotion if you can help it." I nodded. "The truth is damning enough." He smiled faintly. "Exactly." When we entered, Rachel was at the defendant's table, her lawyer beside her. She looked thinner, paler. Her hair was pulled back, dark circles under her eyes. Linda sat in the front row behind her, clutching a tissue. For a moment, our eyes met. 5 years of shared life flashing between us. But then I remembered the emails. The hospital, the blue bow tie on that teddy bear. My stomach hardened. I sat beside Robert without a word. The bailiff called the court to order as Judge Karen Mitchell entered. Robert stood first. "Your Honor, this is a case of deliberate paternity fraud. We will present DNA evidence proving my client is not the father, along with emails showing months of planning to deceive him into signing legal documents." His words were sharp, controlled. Rachel's lawyer countered with a softer approach. "My client made mistakes, yes, but under extreme emotional distress. She feared losing her marriage and faced abandonment by the biological father." I stared straight ahead. Emotional distress didn't excuse a lie this big. Robert called me as the first witness. I walked to the stand, swore to tell the truth, and sat. He guided me through the events of June 15th. The text from Rachel, the drive to the hospital, Linda blocking the door. My voice stayed steady until I described seeing the baby for the first time. I could feel the courtroom shift, eyes fixed on me. Robert handed me the printed email dated 3 months before the birth. I read it aloud. "Michael can't know. Once he signs the birth certificate, everything will be easier." A low murmur rippled through the room. Rachel's lawyer stood for cross-examination, trying to chip at my composure. "Did you ever consider working through this as a couple, forgiving her?" "No," I said simply. "She didn't just cheat. She planned to deceive me into raising another man's child. That's not something you work through. Isn't it possible her actions came from desperation to give you the family you wanted? No, I replied. Her own words prove otherwise. I tapped the stack of printed emails. This wasn't desperation. It was design. Rachel walked to the witness stand, moving like every step weighed her down. She swore in and sat, her hands twisting in her lap. Her lawyer's voice was gentle. Tell us what led to your actions. Rachel's eyes glistened. When I found out I was pregnant, I hoped it was Michael's. But I knew it might be Carlos's. He didn't want children. He left. I was scared. I thought if I stayed quiet, Michael would love the baby as his own. The courtroom was silent, except for her sniffles. I stared at her, wondering if she really believed fear excused months of calculated deceit. My jaw tightened. I knew Robert would tear through her story the moment cross-examination began. Robert stood, moving toward the stand with a deliberate calm. Mrs. Carter, you claim you were scared, but your emails show careful planning. Let's read one together. He held up a printout. We need to be careful. Michael can't suspect anything. Once he signs the birth certificate, everything will be easier. That doesn't sound like panic. That sounds like a plan. Rachel shifted uncomfortably. I was trying to protect my marriage, she said. Robert's voice sharpened. By committing fraud? She flinched. I made a mistake. He leaned in slightly. A mistake is forgetting an appointment. You made multiple deliberate choices over months to hide the truth, involve another man in the deception, and try to force my client into legal responsibility. Robert's questions grew more precise. When did the affair begin? Last summer. At a conference in Chicago. And it continued for how long? A few months, she whispered. During that time, you and my client were actively trying for a child. Yes. So, you knew there was a real possibility the baby wasn't his, but you never told him. I didn't think Robert cut in. You didn't think about the legal consequences? Or about how this betrayal would destroy him? You thought about yourself. Her eyes darted to the gallery, to Linda, who sat pale and still. The jury of onlookers wasn't swayed by her tears. The damage was already clear, printed on paper and sealed in the DNA results. Robert changed angles. Did Carlos know about your plan to name my client as the father? Rachel hesitated. Yes. What did he say? He said it would be better that way, that he wasn't ready to be a father. Robert looked at the judge. So, the biological father actively conspired with you to deceive my client. Objection, her lawyer barked. Withdrawn, Robert said smoothly, turning back to Rachel. After the DNA test proved Michael wasn't the father, why did you still attempt to file the birth certificate with his name? Her voice broke. I was desperate. The hospital needed the paperwork and Carlos had blocked me. I thought maybe Michael would calm down. I felt my chest tighten. Calm down. After this. Robert called the next witness, a nurse from Mount Sinai's maternity ward. She testified that Rachel had come to the desk alone, paperwork in hand, and said her husband wasn't available to sign right now, but that she'd get his signature later. The nurse said hospital policy required both parents' consent, and when she insisted on waiting, Rachel became visibly irritated. Listening to it confirmed everything I already knew. She wasn't going to stop unless someone stopped her. I kept my face still, but inside, each word felt like a nail sealing the coffin of our marriage. The courtroom scribes wrote every word. Robert didn't need to embellish anything. The facts were devastating on their own. When the last witness stepped down, Robert stood for his closing statement. He moved with quiet authority, holding up the DNA results in one hand and the March email in the other. This is not a case of confusion or panic. This is deliberate fraud. Months of planning to force my client into 18 years of responsibility for another man's child. Even after DNA proved the truth, Mrs. Carter still attempted to falsify legal documents. That is a crime. That is betrayal at the deepest level. He placed the evidence on the table, his voice steady. We ask the court to hold her accountable, not just for my client's sake, but for the integrity of the law. Rachel's lawyer, Victoria, rose slowly, playing to the emotions in the room. No one denies mistakes were made, she began, but we must see them in context. A woman struggling with infertility, abandoned by the biological father, terrified of losing her marriage, acted out of fear, not malice. She has admitted her mistakes. She needs understanding, not punishment. I stared straight ahead. I wasn't buying it, and neither, from the looks on their faces, were most of the people in the courtroom. Fear might explain one bad decision. It didn't explain months of deception coordinated with another man and an attempt to file false documents after the truth was proven. Judge Karen Mitchell removed her glasses, scanning the courtroom before speaking. The evidence is clear. This was not a temporary lapse in judgment. Mrs. Carter engaged in a months-long deception, attempted to submit false information on a legal document, and did so even after DNA results disproved paternity. She turned her gaze to Rachel. Your actions show a disturbing disregard for both the law and your husband's rights. Every word landed like a gavel strike in my chest. The truth was now official, carved into the court record. I felt the tension in my shoulders start to release just a little. Mrs. Carter, Judge Mitchell continued, you are fined $5,000 and sentenced to 100 hours of community service. This fraud conviction will remain on your record. Mr. Carter's petition for divorce is granted, and he is legally absolved of all paternity rights and responsibilities regarding the child. The gavel came down hard. The sound echoed in the silent room. Rachel slumped into her chair. Linda leaned in, whispering, but Rachel didn't look up. I stood, buttoning my jacket. It was over. Not in the way I once imagined our story ending, but over. Outside the courthouse, the autumn sun painted the stone steps gold. David clapped me on the shoulder. It's done, man. You won. I shook my head slightly. It's not about winning. It's about truth. Robert joined us, handing me a few final papers. Divorce will be processed quickly. You can start fresh now. I looked back at the courthouse doors, half expecting Rachel to come running out, but they stayed shut. I turned away and walked down the steps. Each one felt lighter than the last. The weight I'd been carrying since that day in the hospital was finally gone. When I got home, the quiet was almost too much. No voices, no footsteps, just the faint hum of the fridge. I took off my jacket and laid it over the chair, staring at the bare walls. The apartment felt sterile, like it was waiting for a life I hadn't started yet. I opened the window and let the cool fall air in. It smelled different than it had on those nights Rachel was here. Fresher, lighter. I walked past the box where I'd thrown everything tied to her. Photos, anniversary cards, the tie she gave me. I closed the lid. That chapter was sealed. For the first time in months, I felt like I could breathe without something pressing down on my chest. 2 weeks later, I met with a realtor to list the house in Brooklyn. Walking through it one last time was harder than I expected. The nursery, the kitchen where we danced to old songs, the couch where we'd argued and made up. All of it was heavy with memories now twisted by betrayal. We'll get good offers, the realtor said, but I barely heard her. This wasn't about money. It was about cutting the last tie. When the sale papers were signed, I felt a strange mix of grief and relief. Some spaces can't be reclaimed, and some you shouldn't even try to reclaim. I moved into a modern apartment in Manhattan. Floor-to-ceiling windows overlooking the city. No shared history here, just blank walls, clean lines, and the quiet hum of the street below. David came over with a bottle of whiskey to christen the place, as he put it. We sat on the balcony looking out over the skyline. Feels different, doesn't it? He asked. I nodded. Like I finally closed the door on that part of my life. The city lights glittered, and for the first time in months, I felt something close to excitement. Not for what I'd lost, but for what I could build from here. Throwing myself into work came naturally. Deadlines didn't lie. Spreadsheets didn't cheat. I stayed late, took on extra projects, and a few months later, the promotion I'd been chasing finally came through. Senior Investment Manager at Sterling and Finch. My boss shook my hand, saying, "You've earned this." I thought about how Rachel once told me she was proud of my drive. That memory didn't sting anymore. It just didn't matter. My work was mine again, untouched by her shadow. And it felt good, better than good, to have something I'd built entirely on my own terms. One night, months after the verdict, my phone buzzed with a text from an unknown number. "I heard about your promotion. I'm sorry for everything. I know it's too late, but I truly am sorry. The baby's doing well. Sometimes he smiles just like you would have." I stared at the screen, my pulse steady. The old me might have responded. The man I was now simply deleted it. Seconds later, another buzz, this time from David. "Dinner tomorrow. My treat." I smiled and typed back, "You're on." I didn't need closure from Rachel. I already had it in the life I was living now. The silence in my apartment now was different from the silence after the hospital. Back then it was heavy, suffocating. Now it was peace. I could sit with a book, a glass of bourbon, and hear nothing but the city breathing through my open window. No tension in the air. No wondering what messages were waiting on my phone. Sometimes I'd think about how quickly everything had fallen apart and how quickly I'd started to rebuild. I wasn't over it. Maybe you never get over something like that. But I was past it, and that was enough. Little things started to shift. I slept better. I laughed more. I caught myself humming in the mornings while making coffee. Even the barista at the corner cafe noticed. "You seem lighter these days," she said with a grin. I didn't explain why. Some stories are too long, too raw to share over a cup of coffee. But she was right. Every day without drama or manipulation felt like a deposit into a savings account of peace, and I was finally in the black. At a client dinner one evening, David leaned over. "Sarah from accounting asked if you were coming." I looked across the table to see her glance away quickly, a faint smile on her lips. She was smart, funny, always sharp in meetings. The old me might have jumped at the chance, but I wasn't ready. Not yet. I'd learned the hard way that trust wasn't something you gave freely. It was something you earned piece by piece. Still, for the first time, I didn't immediately shut the door on the idea. One night, I stood at my window, watching the lights of Manhattan stretch into the distance. Cars moved like veins of light through the streets, and somewhere far above, a plane blinked across the sky. My life wasn't the one I'd planned. But maybe it could still be the one I wanted. I thought about all the men who'd been in my position and stayed silent. I was glad I hadn't. The truth had cost me my marriage, but it had given me back myself. As the city buzzed below, I made myself a promise. I would never ignore the warning signs again. I would never let hope blind me to the truth. And I would never, ever allow someone to chain me to a lie. Some might call it cynicism. I called it survival. My past was behind me, the court's ruling etched in stone. My future was open, a blank canvas. I poured a drink, took a slow sip, and let the sound of the city fill the room. Whatever came next, I was ready for it. 2 months later, David sent me a link with no context. It was an online article. Paternity fraud case sets legal precedent in New York. My name wasn't mentioned, but the details were unmistakable. The story had gone public, anonymized, but powerful. The comments section was full of men sharing their own experiences, some never having fought back. I scrolled for nearly an hour, realizing this wasn't just my battle. I'd been one of the lucky ones. I had proof, a lawyer, and the will to fight. For the first time, I felt something more than relief. I felt a responsibility. That same week, I started getting emails from people I didn't know. Men who'd been trapped in similar lies, women who'd watched brothers or fathers go through the same thing. They thanked me for standing up, even anonymously. One man wrote, "I wish I'd had the courage to do what you did. Now I'm 12 years in, paying for a child who isn't mine." I read every message, even the painful ones. It made me realize my story wasn't just about betrayal. It was about warning others. The weight of that truth was heavy, but it felt like the kind worth carrying. I met Robert for lunch at a quiet steakhouse. He'd seen the article, too. "You know," he said, cutting into his ribeye, "cases like yours could push for stronger paternity testing laws." I nodded. If it saves even one guy from going through what I did, it's worth it. Robert studied me for a moment. "Most men just want to disappear after something like this. You seem like you want to build something out of it." I didn't answer right away, but he was right. I wasn't looking to relive the pain. I was looking to make sure it meant something. News came through a mutual acquaintance that Rachel had moved to New Jersey with her mother. Carlos wasn't in the picture. I didn't feel satisfaction or pity, just nothing. She'd become part of my past, like a closed file. People sometimes think the opposite of love is hate, but they're wrong. It's indifference. And that's what I felt now. No anger, no longing, just a simple absence where she used to be. That absence was freedom. I'd stopped running during the divorce. Too much weight on my mind and shoulders. But one Saturday morning, I laced up my old sneakers and hit the pavement. The city was waking up. Coffee carts steaming, cabs honking, sunlight catching on glass towers. My stride was rusty at first, but soon I found my rhythm. Step after step, block after block, it felt like I was running out the last of the poison that had been in my veins for over a year. By the time I got back to my building, sweat-soaked and breathless, I felt lighter. Sarah from accounting had been patient. A friendly smile here, a quick chat there. One Friday evening, she asked if I wanted to grab dinner. This time, I said yes. We met at a little bistro near the office, the kind with low lighting and wine racks lining the walls. Conversation flowed easily. Work, travel, favorite books. She didn't pry about my past, and I didn't offer it. For the first time, I wasn't comparing someone to Rachel. I was just there in the moment with someone worth listening to. We saw each other a few more times over the next month. I kept my guard up, not out of suspicion, but caution. Trust, I'd learned, isn't something you rebuild in one grand gesture. It's 100 small ones, showing up on time, keeping your word, listening without judgment. Sarah did all of that without trying too hard. I noticed, and slowly I started letting her in a little at a time. One crisp Sunday, I walked through Prospect Park, the same place I once imagined teaching my child to ride a bike. I half expected a pang of loss, but it didn't come. Instead, I watched other families laughing, kids chasing each other through the leaves, and felt calm. My future might look different than I'd once pictured, but it was still mine. That was enough, maybe more than enough. It had been over a year since the hospital. Sometimes late at night, I'd think about that moment outside room 412, Linda blocking the door, the teddy bear slipping from my hand. I could remember every detail, but the sharp edges were gone. It was a story now, not a wound. And like all stories, it had an ending. Mine just happened to lead somewhere better than I expected. Victory didn't come with confetti or applause. It came in the quiet, in knowing I'd faced the truth, fought for myself, and come out clean on the other side. It came in a peaceful apartment, in running shoes by the door, in the possibility of new love without old shadows hanging over it. I'd lost a marriage, but I'd gained something harder to find, the ability to stand my ground when it mattered most. And for me, that was the only win I needed. One afternoon, I got a voicemail from a reporter at a legal news outlet. She wanted to interview me about my case, anonymously if I preferred. I played the message twice, weighing it. Talking meant reopening the wound, but it could also mean shining a light where most people never look. That night, I called her back. I'll do it, I said. But the focus isn't on me. It's on the problem. She agreed. I hung up, feeling that same mix of nerves and purpose I'd felt walking into court. This time though, I wasn't defending myself. I was speaking for the guys who never got the chance. The interview took place in a small midtown studio. Just me, the reporter, and a single camera. "Walk me through the first moment you knew something was wrong," she said. My mind jumped straight to the hospital door, Linda's hand on my chest. I told the story in clean, even beats. No embellishment, no extra drama. The facts were enough. When it was over, the reporter leaned back. "You kept your composure through all of that?" I shook my head. "No. I just saved the worst of it for when no one could see." 2 weeks later, the piece went live. One man's fight against paternity fraud and the law that backed him. My name wasn't there, but my voice was. It outlined every step: the hospital, the emails, the DNA test, the trial. The final paragraph quoted me, "The truth costs less than a lie in the long run." I didn't expect much reaction, but the article was shared hundreds of times in the first day. My inbox filled with more messages. Among the messages was a handwritten letter slid under my apartment door. No return address. It read, "I'm 52. I've been paying child support for a child that isn't mine for 19 years. I wish I'd had your courage back then. Because of you, I'm finally going to get tested." I held that paper for a long time. For the first time since the verdict, I realized the story wasn't just over for me. It was starting something for others. That was worth every moment I'd spent in that courtroom. Sarah and I had dinner again. This time at a rooftop place overlooking the Hudson. The city stretched wide below us, lights flickering like a living map. She asked how the interview went. I told her it was strange, speaking about something so personal to an audience I'd never see. She smiled. Sometimes the people who need to hear it aren't in the room. We clinked glasses and I realized she wasn't just talking about the article. She was talking about me, about being willing to open the door to a future without dragging the past behind me. I woke up the next morning before sunrise. The city was still half asleep, a pale blue glow creeping through the skyline. I brewed coffee, stepped onto the balcony, and just stood there. No rush, no tension. I wasn't waiting for a text that would ruin my day. I wasn't planning my next move in a fight. I was just living. The steam from my cup curled into the cold air. And for the first time in years, I felt like my life was completely mine. One afternoon, an email landed in my inbox from an address I didn't recognize. The subject line was just, "I owe you." It was from Carlos. "You didn't deserve what happened." I was a coward. I should have stepped up. "I'm sorry." I stared at it for a minute, then closed it without replying. His words didn't change the past. They didn't erase what Rachel had done, and they didn't matter to my future. Some things don't need closure. They just need distance. Robert invited me to speak on a panel about family law reforms. It wasn't my usual scene: suits, microphones, and policy talk. But when it was my turn, I kept it simple. This isn't about punishing people. It's about protecting them from being trapped in a lie. The law is the last line of defense when trust is gone. The room was quiet, and for a moment, I thought maybe I'd said too little. Then the applause came, steady and strong. Months later, I went back to Prospect Park on a Sunday afternoon. The air was warm, the grass alive with picnics and soccer games. I sat on a bench and watched the world move. I wasn't thinking about what could have been anymore. I was thinking about what was. The pain had become part of the background noise. Still there, but no longer drowning out everything else. I realized then this was what moving on actually felt like. Not forgetting, but living alongside the memory without letting it own you. That night, I sat at my desk and opened the box where I kept every piece of evidence from the trial. the emails, the DNA results, the court documents. One by one, I fed them into the shredder. The sound was steady, final. When the last page disappeared, I closed the lid, turned off the light, and went to bed. The chapter was over. The story would always exist, but I didn't need to keep reading it. Tomorrow, I'd wake up and start another one. It was late evening when my phone rang. Dad's number flashing on the screen. We hadn't talked much through the whole ordeal. He was never one for long speeches. "I read that article," he said, his voice low but steady. "Proud of you, son. You stood your ground." Simple words, but they hit harder than I expected. For months, I'd been carrying the weight alone, even with friends beside me. Hearing him say it felt like a final stamp of approval from the man whose opinion mattered most. "Thanks, Dad," I said, and I meant it in ways that went far beyond the case. A week later, I spotted Rachel by chance at a bookstore downtown. She was flipping through a children's book, the stroller beside her. For a moment, I froze, caught between walking away and confronting her. She looked up, saw me, and her face tightened. No words passed between us. I nodded once, not in forgiveness, but in final acknowledgement that whatever we'd been was over. Then I turned and walked out, leaving her in the aisle. My heart didn't race. My hands didn't shake. I was simply done. One evening after dinner at her place, Sarah asked quietly, "Do you think you'll ever want a family again?" I took a long breath. Yes. But not because I need to fix something from my past. Only if it's with the right person for the right reasons. She smiled, touching my hand lightly. That's the only way it should be. Her answer didn't pressure me, didn't demand a timeline. It was just understanding, and that was enough for now. The panel appearance had led to another invitation. This time to speak at a university law class. I walked into the lecture hall facing 50 students scribbling notes. "You're going to hear a lot about statutes and precedents," I told them. "But remember, behind every case file is a person who has to live with the outcome." I shared the facts of my story, watching their faces shift from curiosity to disbelief. When I finished, the professor thanked me. "This will stick with them," he said. That was the point. While cleaning my closet one Saturday, I found one last box I'd missed. A mix of old photographs, ticket stubs, and handwritten notes from Rachel. I sat on the floor, sorting through them. Some made me smile faintly. Others brought back the bitter edge. When I was done, I put the ones worth keeping into a small envelope. Not because I wanted to revisit them, but because they were part of my life's map. The rest went into the trash. Letting go isn't one big moment. It's 1,000 small ones scattered over time. Out of the blue, I got a Facebook message from the nurse who'd testified at my trial. "I just wanted to say, you did the right thing. I've seen too many men sign without asking questions, and it never ends well. You handled it with more dignity than most." I thanked her, feeling a strange warmth at hearing it from someone who'd been there that day. It reminded me that the truth had been on my side from the start. I just needed the courage to stand in it. A year to the day since the court ruling, I woke up early and went for a run. The streets were slick from overnight rain, the city still stretching awake. There was no ceremony, no celebration, just the steady rhythm of my feet hitting the pavement. When I got home, I poured coffee, sat by the window, and looked out over Manhattan. I didn't need to mark the date with anything grand. Living well was enough. That afternoon, I received an email from a state assemblyman's office. They were reviewing proposals for mandatory paternity testing before birth certificates were finalized. "Your case," the email read, "has been referenced in several discussions as an example of why reform is needed. If you're willing, we'd like your input." I stared at the screen, realizing the fight I thought was over had taken on a life of its own. Maybe this was the real legacy. Not my personal victory, but the changes that could protect others. That night, I met Sarah for dinner. Over dessert, she asked if I wanted to take a weekend trip together, somewhere quiet, just us. For the first time in years, I said yes without hesitation. No mental checklist of risks, no weight from the past holding me back, just a genuine yes. As we talked about possible destinations, I realized that life after betrayal wasn't about going back to who I was before. It was about becoming someone stronger, wiser, and still open to what might come next. Looking back, I used to think the day in the hospital was the worst moment of my life. Now I see it for what it was, the turning point. The day the truth shattered one life so I could build another. I lost a marriage, but I found my voice. I walked into court to defend myself and walked out knowing I'd help protect more than just me. People think strength is about never breaking. But the truth is, it's about breaking and then standing back up anyway. The hospital door closed on one future, but when I stepped away, I opened the door to a better one that belongs entirely to me. And that's a story worth telling. The weekend trip with Sarah was to a small cabin upstate. The silence there was different from the city's. It was the deep, quiet hum of nature, broken only by the crackle of the fireplace and the wind in the pines. We didn't do much. We read, we cooked simple meals, we walked through the cold, crisp woods. For the first time in what felt like a lifetime, my mind was truly, completely quiet. There was no case to build, no defense to mount, no evidence to catalog. There was just the present moment. On our last night, sitting by the fire, Sarah didn't ask for the story. Instead, she said, "You seem at peace here." I looked at the flames, considering her words. "I think I'm getting there," I said. "It's not about forgetting. It's about making room for other things." She nodded, understanding without needing it spelled out. That quiet acceptance meant more than any expression of pity ever could. Back in the city, I followed up with the assemblyman's office. I met with a young, sharp-eyed policy aide named Anya, who laid out the draft proposal. It wasn't about mandatory testing for everyone, but about making it a standard, offered part of the birth certificate process, with clear opt-out provisions. The goal is informed consent, Anya explained. To ensure every signature is given with all the available facts. I read through the draft, my own experience echoing in every clause. It was rational, fair, and it would have saved me a world of pain. My input was simple: emphasize the clarity, remove the ambiguity. Make the truth the default, not a secret you have to fight to uncover. Work continued to be my anchor. The promotion came with new challenges, bigger accounts, more complex strategies. I thrived on it. The logic of the market was a language I understood, a world where cause and effect were clear, and performance was measured in cold, hard numbers. There was a purity to it that I found comforting. David joked that I was becoming a workaholic, but he understood. It was my way of rebuilding, of creating something tangible and successful that was entirely my own creation. Months turned, blending into a new rhythm. Sarah and I settled into a comfortable pattern. We gave each other space but were there when it mattered. It was mature, it was calm, and it was exactly what I needed. The ghosts of my past marriage didn't haunt this new relationship. They had been acknowledged, laid to rest, and were no longer allowed to dictate my future. One afternoon, I was cleaning out my old wallet, a habit I'd gotten into, purging the old to make way for the new. Behind a stack of business cards, I found a faded ultrasound picture. The one from the first appointment, when everything was still hope and excitement. I held it for a long moment, feeling not the sharp sting of betrayal, but a distant, softer ache for what I had believed was real. Then I carefully tore it in half and dropped it into the trash. It wasn't an act of anger, but of finality. That potential future, that specific dream, was gone. And it was okay. I received a formal letter from the state, a copy of the proposed legislation. My name wasn't on it, but the cover letter thanked me for my valuable contribution as a consulted stakeholder. I framed that letter and hung it in my home office, next to my business degree. It wasn't a trophy for winning a case, it was a marker that the pain had been used for something good. That my story had helped change the rules, even just a little, to make things fairer for the next guy. Life, I learned, isn't about avoiding storms. It's about learning to dance in the rain, and maybe even helping to build a better shelter for those who come after you. My shelter was made of truth, reinforced by law, and now, finally, filled with a quiet, hard-won peace. The story wasn't about the lie anymore. It was about what I built after it. And that building was just beginning. The change was subtle at first, like the days slowly getting longer after the solstice. You don't notice it happening until you realize the light lasts through dinner. I stopped seeing my life in terms of before and after. The categories blurred, then dissolved. My life wasn't a reaction anymore, it was just my life. Sarah and I took another trip, this time to the coast. We walked on a beach, the Atlantic wind whipping around us, and she laughed, trying to keep her hair out of her face. I watched her, this smart, capable woman choosing to be here with me, and I felt a simple, uncomplicated joy. It wasn't the dizzying high of early romance I'd once known, it was something sturdier, built on a foundation of mutual respect and the quiet understanding that we were both people with pasts, choosing to build a present together. We talked about it one evening over fresh seafood at a dockside restaurant. "I'm not looking for you to be anyone but who you are," she said, her hand resting on mine. Scars and all. And I believed her. Because I wasn't looking for her to fix me or replace what I'd lost. We were just two separate, whole people, choosing to walk side by side. Back in the city, the rhythm of my days felt entirely my own. The promotion at Sterling and Finch settled into a new normal. I led my team with a focus I'd honed in the courtroom: clarity, evidence, and decisive action. My colleagues respected me, not just for my results, but for a certain steadiness I now carried. I'd been tested in a fire they could only imagine, and I hadn't broken. That knowledge sat quietly within me, a core of unshakable steel. I even started going to David's weekly basketball games again. The familiar slap of sneakers on the court, the trash talk, the shared exhaustion, it was a piece of my old self I could finally reclaim without it hurting. After one game, drenched in sweat and leaning against the chain-link fence, David grinned at me. "You're back, man." The old Carter. I shook my head, taking a long drink of water. "Nah. Just Carter." The proposed legislation, now nicknamed the Informed Paternity Act in the policy circles, gained slow but steady traction. Anya from the Assemblyman's office would email me updates. They'd incorporated my suggestions about simplifying the language, making the opt-out process clear but not cumbersome. It was moving from draft to committee review. I followed its progress not with obsession, but with a detached interest, like watching a ship you helped build finally set sail. Its journey was its own. One rainy Tuesday, I found myself near Mount Sinai Hospital for a client meeting. As my cab waited at a light, I looked up at the familiar brick facade. A year ago, my stomach would have clenched. My heart would have hammered against my ribs. Now, I felt nothing but a faint, historical recognition. That wasn't my world anymore. The light turned green, and the cab drove on. The past stayed where it belonged, behind me. I started volunteering with a men's legal aid group, one that Robert Hughes was involved with. I didn't work on paternity cases, that was too close. Instead, I used my finance skills to help them organize their books and plan their budget. It was a way to contribute without reopening my own wounds. In the quiet, fluorescent-lit office of the nonprofit, surrounded by filing cabinets and the smell of stale coffee, I found another kind of peace. It was the satisfaction of using my skills for something that had nothing to do with profit margins or personal gain. Sarah met me for lunch after one of those sessions. "You seem different when you talk about that place," she observed. "Lighter." She was right. Giving back, even in that small, administrative way, was the final piece of the puzzle. It transformed my painful experience from a personal battle into a tool I could use to help others. My story had a purpose beyond my own survival. The seasons turned again. Fall became winter, and the city dressed itself in lights and glitter. For the first time since the divorce, I put up a small tree in my apartment. It wasn't elaborate, just a few strings of white lights and a handful of ornaments I'd bought new. I didn't need to hide from the season anymore. I could make new traditions, ones that belonged only to me. On New Year's Eve, I stood on my balcony with Sarah, watching the fireworks explode over the skyline. the air was bitingly cold, and we huddled together under a blanket. As the countdown began, the new year didn't feel like a dramatic fresh start. It felt like a seamless continuation of the peace I'd fought so hard to build. My morning routine: coffee, a scan of the financial news, a quick workout, was no longer a mechanical distraction but a genuine pleasure. It was my time, my ritual. Work at Sterling and Finch continued to demand excellence, but the pressure felt different. It was a challenge I welcomed, not a burden I carried. I found myself mentoring a few younger analysts, not with the stern authority of my old boss, but with the patience I'd learned from Robert Hughes. Focus on the data, I'd tell them. The numbers will tell you the story, but only if you're willing to listen without putting words in their mouth. It was a lesson that went far beyond investment portfolios. Sarah's presence in my life became a comfortable constant. We didn't rush to label things or force a future. We simply enjoyed the quiet rhythm we'd created. Some weekends we'd explore a new exhibit at the Met, others we'd do nothing but order takeout and watch old movies on my couch. The simplicity of it was its own kind of luxury. After the chaos of the past few years, the ordinary felt extraordinary. One Saturday, we were walking through the Union Square Green Market, surrounded by the vibrant colors of fresh produce and the smell of baked bread. Sarah stopped at a flower stall, choosing a bouquet of sunflowers. "For your kitchen," she said, handing them to me. It was such a small, simple gesture, but it struck me. My apartment was no longer just a sterile, modern box I slept in. It was a home someone wanted to make brighter. The Informed Paternity Act passed its committee vote. Anya sent a brief, professional email with the news, attaching a PDF of the revised draft. I read through the dry, legal language, and a single sentence near the bottom made me pause: "All parties shall be provided with clear, accessible information regarding the availability and implications of genetic paternity testing prior to the execution of the certificate." My fight was in those words. My experience had helped shape that clause. It wouldn't stop every betrayal, but it would hand a flashlight to someone else standing in the dark. I closed the PDF, filed the email away, and went to make dinner. The satisfaction was deep and quiet. David noticed the shift in me too. "You're not just okay, man," he said during one of our now regular Saturday morning runs in the park. "You're solid." He was right. The anger and the grief had been burned away, leaving behind a resilience I could rely on. I wasn't just surviving my life, I was inhabiting it fully. Even the city looked different. The relentless energy of New York, which had once felt like a constant assault during my lowest points, now felt like a symphony of possibility. The honking cabs, the crowded sidewalks, the endless noise, it was the sound of life moving forward, and I was finally moving with it, not against it. I thought about Rachel less and less. When I did, it was without the sharp edge of bitterness. She was a character in a book I'd finished reading long ago. The story was over, the cover closed. The life she was living now in New Jersey with her son and her mother was her own. It had nothing to do with me. That final, complete detachment was the ultimate freedom. One evening, Sarah and I were cooking together in my kitchen, a jazz station playing softly in the background. She was chopping vegetables, and I was seasoning a piece of fish. There was no grand conversation, just the easy, comfortable silence of two people completely at ease with each other. I looked at her, bathed in the warm light of the overhead lamp, and felt a surge of something so profound it was almost overwhelming. It wasn't the frantic passion of new love or the desperate need to fill a void. It was gratitude. Simple, deep, and abiding gratitude for the peace we had built together. Later, as we ate at the small table by the window, the sunflowers she'd bought standing proudly in a vase between us, I realized this was the lesson my entire ordeal had taught me. Happiness isn't a destination you arrive at after you've solved all your problems. It's the quiet music you learn to hear in the spaces between the noise. It's the choice to find joy in a shared meal, comfort in a routine, and hope in the blank page of an ordinary day. The future was still unwritten. There would be challenges, of course. There always are. But I was no longer afraid of them. I had stood in the wreckage of everything I thought I knew and had built something new, something stronger, with my own two hands. I had learned to trust myself again. As I sat there, in the warmth of my own kitchen, with a woman who saw me and valued me for who I was now, not who I'd been, I knew one thing for certain. The greatest victory wasn't in the courtroom or in the new law. It was in this moment. It was in this quiet, unshakable peace. And it was finally, completely, enough. The peace wasn't a static thing, a plateau I had reached. It was more like a deep, steady current carrying me forward. Life began to present opportunities that the old, wounded me would have shied away from. Sterling and Finch opened a small satellite office in London, and my name was floated to lead the initial setup for a 6-month stint. A year ago, the idea of such a drastic change would have sent me into a tailspin of anxiety. Now, I saw it for what it was, a challenge, an adventure. I discussed it with Sarah over dinner, laying out the pros and cons not as a plea for advice, but as a partner seeking counsel. 6 months is a long time, she said, her tone thoughtful, not worried. But FaceTime exists for a reason. And it's an incredible opportunity for you. Her support was unwavering, devoid of any clinging neediness or fear. It was the response of someone secure in herself and in what we had built. "We'll make it work," she said simply, and that was that. The planning was a whirlwind of visas, housing arrangements, and strategy meetings. It felt good to use my brain for building again, not just for battling or defending. David threw me a bon voyage party at his apartment, a loud, cheerful affair filled with colleagues and friends. As I looked around the room, I realized my world had expanded again. It was no longer defined by a single, catastrophic event. The day I left, Sarah drove me to the airport. We didn't say dramatic goodbyes. There was a long, deep kiss at the curb, a promise in her eyes, and a simple, "Call me when you land." Standing in the security line, I felt a thrilling mix of nerves and anticipation. I was stepping into the unknown, but I was doing it from a place of strength, not escape. London was a revelation. The city was a beautiful, ancient contrast to New York's relentless modernity. I found a flat in Canary Wharf, all glass and steel, with a view of the Thames. The work was demanding, the perfect kind of all-consuming that left no room for ghosts of the past. My team was a mix of eager British graduates and a few seasoned transplants. I led them with the same clear-headed focus I'd honed in my own recovery, and they responded with respect and dedication. Sarah and I fell into a new rhythm. Our time difference became a scheduled intimacy. My evenings were her afternoons. We'd video chat, me with a cup of tea in my flat, her at her desk during her lunch break. The conversations were different, less about the day-to-day and more about the experience. I'd tell her about navigating the tube, the perplexing charm of British humor, the stunning history around every corner. She'd tell me about a new project at work, or a funny story about David. The distance didn't feel like a separation, it felt like an expansion of our relationship, proving its resilience. I even started dating again. Not Sarah, of course. I started dating myself. I'd take myself to museums on weekends, wandering through the Tate Modern for hours. I'd sit in quiet pubs with a book, comfortable in my own solitude. I learned the city on foot, discovering hidden gardens and bustling markets. For the first time, perhaps ever, I was truly, completely my own company and I enjoyed it. News from home was infrequent and peaceful. David emailed pictures from his latest hiking trip. Robert Hughes sent a brief note saying the Informed Paternity Act had passed another legislative hurdle. It was progress, steady and slow. I felt a flicker of pride, but it was distant, like hearing about an old-school friend's accomplishment. It was part of my history, but it no longer defined my present. One rainy Sunday afternoon, I was browsing a bookshop in Covent Garden. The smell of old paper and ink was comforting. As I reached for a volume on the top shelf, my hand brushed against another's. I turned to apologize and found myself looking into the warm, smiling eyes of a woman about my age. "After you," she said, her accent crisp and polite. We ended up talking about books for 10 minutes right there in the aisle. Her name was Eleanor, an editor for a small publishing house. It was a pleasant, intelligent conversation. The old me, the one desperate for validation, might have seen it as a sign, might have asked for her number. The man I was now simply enjoyed the connection for what it was, a lovely, fleeting moment with an interesting stranger. I wished her a good day and continued my browsing, the encounter leaving a faint smile on my face but no turmoil in its wake. I was whole, and a conversation with a pretty woman couldn't shake my foundation. That was the greatest victory of all. Not the legal win, not the new relationship, not the professional success. It was this unshakable sense of self. The peace I had fought for had become my default setting. The past was a chapter one had read and learned from, but the book was still being written, and I was finally excited to turn the page. The story, my story, was far from over. In fact, it felt like it was just getting good. The 6 months in London passed not in a blur, but in a series of vivid, fulfilling moments. I built a life there, a temporary one, but one that was entirely my own making. The project was a success, the office was established and running smoothly. My boss back in New York offered to extend my stay, to make the position permanent. It was a testament to the work I'd done, a major career victory. I thanked him, but declined. The offer was flattering, but as I sat in my glass-walled flat looking out at the lights of London, I knew my home was no longer just a place. It was a person. It was the life I was choosing to return to. The ambition that had once driven me, that had been so tied to proving myself, had mellowed into a quiet confidence. I didn't need to run anymore, not to something new, and not from something old. My last week in the city was a farewell tour of my favorite spots. A final pint at the quiet pub near my flat, a last walk through the Tate, a final proper roast dinner. I felt a fondness for the city, a gratitude for the sanctuary it had provided, but no sense of loss in leaving. I was ready. The flight back to JFK was smooth. Stepping out into the familiar, frantic energy of New York felt like putting on a well-worn, comfortable jacket. Sarah was there at arrivals, just as she said she would be. She wasn't holding a sign or waving frantically, she was just leaning against a pillar, a small smile on her face. When she saw me, her smile widened, and she walked over. We hugged, a long, tight embrace that said everything words couldn't. It felt like coming home. My apartment felt different when I walked in. It was still mine, still the clean, modern space I'd created, but it felt, waiting. It felt ready for the next chapter. Sarah had stocked the fridge with my favorite coffee and a few essentials. It was a small thing, but it meant the world. We ordered takeout from our favorite Thai place and spent the evening on the couch, not talking about the big future, just being together. The ease was still there, deepened by the time apart. Reintegrating at Sterling and Finch was seamless. I was welcomed back as a success, the guy who had conquered the London project. The promotion was made official. My new corner office had a view of the downtown skyline. I hung the framed letter from the state assemblyman on the wall. It wasn't a reminder of the battle anymore, it was a reminder of what can be built after one. A few weeks after my return, I was meeting David for drinks. He slid a manila envelope across the table to me. "What's this?" I asked. "Open it," he said, a smirk on his face. Inside were printouts of real estate listings. Not for sleek Manhattan apartments, but for brownstones in Brooklyn. For houses with small gardens in neighborhoods where you could hear kids playing in the streets. I looked up at him, confused. What am I supposed to do with this? He shrugged, taking a sip of his beer. Just looking. Thought you might be ready for a different kind of project. One with more than one bedroom. He let the implication hang in the air. He wasn't pushing. He was just presenting a possibility, the way he'd always done. That night, I didn't look at the listings. But I didn't throw them away either. I left the envelope on my kitchen counter. For the first time since my life had blown apart, the idea of a house, a home, a future that was bigger than just me, didn't trigger a panic attack. It sparked a faint, curious flicker. What would that look like now? Who would I be in that story? A month later, Sarah and I were walking through Prospect Park on a perfect fall Sunday, the same park where I'd once imagined a future that was stolen from me. The leaves were a firestorm of red and orange. Kids were laughing, flying kites, tumbling in the grass. I watched them, and I felt no ache, no sense of loss. Only a quiet sense of observation. Sarah squeezed my hand. "You're quiet," she said. "I was just thinking," I said, stopping to look at her. The sun was behind her, lighting up her hair. "About how different this view is from the last time I saw it." She nodded, understanding without me having to explain. "Views change," she said softly. "Sometimes for the better." I took a breath, the crisp air filling my lungs. The past was truly behind me. It was a part of my history, but it no longer cast a shadow over my present. The future was a wide-open field, and for the first time, I wasn't afraid to walk into it. I was just curious to see what was on the other side. The story of the man who was betrayed, who fought back, who won in court, that story was complete. It had a beginning, a middle, and an end. This, what I was living now, was a new story. And I was finally ready to write the first page.